Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to introduce our first distinguished guest who will come on the stage of WATS Forum Bangkok 2019. He's a former Prime Minister of Bhutan, acclaimed for his work in conservation and in making gross national happiness a key metric for government policy. With his involvement, a groundbreaking initiative recently got underway in Bhutan. This aims to keep the kingdom carbon neutral forever, while helping its people preserve their culture and secure their future. He's come with the topic today, balancing carbon neutral drive with gross national happiness direction. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please join me to welcome Mr. Dasho Tshering Tobgay.
Kusuzangbo, Sawjikap. Professor Singh mentioned 5 researchers. I'm not quite a researcher. I see myself more like an implementer. And I'm just a warm-up act. The main act, the superstars, will follow after me. I'm so happy to be in Thailand. You see, Thailand and Bhutan are very different. Bhutan is a small, landlocked country in the Himalayas, barely 700,000 people. Thailand, you have 70 million people and a long, beautiful coastline. So we are very different. Our population, our geography has made life in our 2 countries quite different. But we share many commonalities too. To begin with, both countries are predominantly Buddhist. Second, neither Thailand nor Bhutan were ever colonized. Third, we both have monarchies that we love. We consider our kings Dharma kings. And then our kings have introduced a unique form of development in both our countries. And both in the 1970s. In Thailand, you have sustainable economy. In Bhutan, we have gross national happiness. So we are quite similar. But it's not just Thailand and Bhutan in the world. We have 206 different sovereign states. Every state has a government. We take governments for granted. You can't have a state without a government. But we never ask the question, what is the purpose of government? The purpose of government can be to protect a country. It used to be to conquer other countries. Now it is to defend their country. Within the country, you want peace and stability, law and order, justice. Governments would be responsible for developing public infrastructure, providing welfare, and raising taxes to fund all these activities. This is why governments all over the world, because they need taxes, they need the money. Governments are obsessed with developing their economy. And in some ways, rightfully so. But the economy alone does not provide well-being for the people. So the primary purpose of government must be to generate happiness and well-being. In Bhutan, 400 years ago, when our country was founded, our founding father, Shabdung Ngawan Namgyal, he proclaimed, he started the first government in Bhutan, and he proclaimed 400 years ago that if a government cannot create happiness for its people, the government has no purpose to exist. 400 years ago, he said, if a government cannot create happiness, that means the primary purpose of the government is to create happiness for its people. If a government can't do that, the government has no purpose to exist. So in today's parlance, that government should be voted out, should not get the vote of the people. So we've been fortunate with our leaders in defining the purpose of government. Because as recently now as 40 years ago, this happened 400 years ago. 40 years ago, our fourth king, he pronounced, for Bhutan, gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. GNH is more important than GDP. But this is for Bhutan, not necessarily for the world. And for Bhutan, gross national happiness is a holistic approach to development. One that takes away our single-minded efforts at creating economic growth at all costs towards guiding the government towards sustainable economic development, balanced with social progress, environmental protection, preservation of the culture, and good governance. So that is gross national happiness for Bhutan. It is an idea that is being implemented in order to fulfill the full potential of human beings, socially, economically, spiritually. Does gross national happiness have a place in the world? Our fourth king was very clear. He said, for Bhutan, gross national happiness is more important than gross national product. But happily, many people in the world are looking at Bhutan, studying Bhutan, and coming up with alternate development paradigms in their own countries. We've had experts in Europe and Canada and America and Brazil work on gross national happiness or similar development concepts to be implemented in their own countries. The UN has taken gross national happiness seriously. Professor Singh showed a slide on the Sustainable Development Goals, very consistent with gross national happiness. In fact, the UN has declared the 20th of March as World Happiness Day. This is significant. World Happiness Day. So you should mark this in your calendar. And every 20th of March, ask yourself, am I happy? Am I creating happiness? And most importantly, ask yourself, is my government creating happiness? Because if my government is not creating happiness, then this government does not have a purpose to exist. For Bhutan, the more we implement gross national happiness and the more work we do on gross national happiness, and more importantly, the more the world knows about gross national happiness, GNH, becomes our brand image. And many people think that all Bhutanese are happy all the time. In fact, many people think that Bhutan is the happiest country in the world. Maybe so. May not be so. That's not the point. The point is to implement policies that create happiness as a public good, not just as an individual pursuit. In fact, there are measurements. The World Happiness Report. This ranks 156 odd countries. Bhutan ranks all the way in 95. And then the Better Planet Index ranks 140 countries. Bhutan ranks again all the way down, 56. Different reports, different results. That doesn't really, well, it's important. It's important to measure happiness. But what's very important is that the results must speak for themselves. So in Bhutan's case, we have, in the last 30 years, life expectancy has grown from 45 years to 70 years, more than 70 years. Why? Healthcare is absolutely free. In the last 30 years, literacy has increased from 50% of the population to 72% of the population, and among youth, it is 93%. Why? Education is completely free. In the last 15 years, poverty has plummeted from 33% to about 8%. Why? In spite of the fact that Bhutan is one of the poorest countries in the world, $2.5 billion GDP, we've been able to use this money well to provide services for the people and to provide welfare. So this is why our poverty rates have fallen. But it's not just that. Our environment is largely pristine. At one time, all of the Himalayas was pristine environment. Today, there are very few pockets. And Bhutan is one such pocket where 72% of our country is under forest cover and we are a biological hotspot. Similarly, our culture, unique, vibrant, alive. And in terms of governance, we are the world's youngest, but perhaps in many measures also a young but successful democracy. So by all these measures, we in Bhutan are enjoying the fruits of gross national happiness. But, like I said, we are now a democracy. And earlier, while our beloved kings, benevolent kings, would deliver the fruits of democracy, gross national happiness, with politicians like me, we need to be a bit careful. And therefore, measuring gross national happiness becomes even more important for Bhutan, regardless of the results that we have enjoyed so far. And so, we have a GNH index to measure gross national happiness. This index has 9 domains. There's living standard, health, and education. These are quite common. All over the world, they are expected, they are understood to be important. And then there is governance and environment. Now, governance and environment, again, most countries in the world, governments in the world, have seen this as important, and most citizens demand them. But then there are 4 others that are cutting edge. This is psychological well-being, time use, culture, and community. So altogether there are 9 domains. These 9 domains are split into 33 indicators and 277 variables. And with this 9 domains, 33 indicators, 277 variables, the Center for Bhutan Studies conducts a survey every 5 years. So the last one was in 2015, the one previous to that was in 2010. Each survey takes into account 8,000 respondents. And each questionnaire, a face-to-face interview, can take as much as 2 hours. And all this is compiled, and the Center for Bhutan Studies releases the GNH situation in Bhutan. So for those who are interested, the index now, at least in 2015, was 0.756. Compared to 5 years ago, a slight increase. Because 5 years ago, in 2010, it was 0.743. Obviously, we are doing a little better. In terms of percentages, 92% of the population have said that they are happy. Some narrowly happy, some deeply happy, but 92% of the population is happy. Compared to 5 years ago, again, a little better. Because in 2010, it was 90% of the population who said they're happy. Income has risen in 5 years by as much as 60%. And for a poor country, this is very important. Sleep. The amount you sleep is important for happiness. I'm just choosing a few indicators that you might find interesting. We sleep on average 8 hours and 46 minutes on average. Even that has increased because by 14 minutes, the amount of sleep we enjoy has increased. We are also working more, but not much. On average, 7 hours and 56 minutes per day. 7 hours and 56 minutes. And guess what? Compared to the previous 5 years, we work 7 minutes more. But more importantly, Men versus women. Guess who works more? Women. Men work 7 hours, 40 minutes on average per day. Women work 8 hours and 8 minutes, a full 28 minutes more. And so who's happier, men or women? Men are happier. In the survey, men are more happier than women. And among the people in Bhutan, who are the happiest lot? People who have never married. I thought it was strange too. Until I was told that people who are never married generally means monks and nuns. So they're the happiest lot. And the unhappiest ones, even more unhappy than the unemployed, are the farmers. It shows how difficult life is in the farms. A lot has to do with wildlife. A lot has to do with protecting our environment. But you get the point. We have an understanding. We can get so much information. The top 10 reasons that are relevant to happiness. Of the top 10, number 1 is money. Some people think in Bhutan we don't care about money. Number 1 contributor to happiness is money. Number 2, health. Number 3 is your family. So on and so forth. But number 8, bottom of the list, number 8 is spirituality. Number 9 is community. Number 10 is environment. Now what this means is you take our environment for granted. Our environment is good, we take it for granted. Spirituality is thriving, you take it for granted. Our communities are strong, we take it for granted. But we can get this and many more information, many more important information from the GNH index. Now this is used. Firstly, we understand where we are. Secondly, it's used by the government now to create policy, to create plans. So that's how GNH is actually operationalized in Bhutan, to create happiness as a public good. So in Bhutan, we have happiness as a public good, but at the same time, happiness as an individual pursuit. Public good, individual pursuit. There's something missing. That is the business entity. The business corporations, they are missing. Because if GNH is important in Bhutan for public good, and happiness is important for the individual, the entity in the middle, public corporations, become very important also. And so the idea that we had, the idea I spearheaded a year ago, was GNH of business. GNH certification of business. It's more or less the same. 9 domains, the same 9 domains. But not 33 indicators, 56 indicators to measure the health, the happiness level, the well-being of our companies. There's also another difference. When we undertake the GNH certification of businesses, you survey the management and also the worker. You survey the worker to assess worker happiness. But we have to survey management to assess organizational commitment to happiness. Workers, living standard, education, health, time use, and psychological well-being are the 5 domains that will generate worker happiness. But on the other hand, you have governance, culture, environment. These are the ones at the organizational level we study to see if organizations are committed to their worker happiness. And it's not just worker happiness. Earlier, it's very common for companies to be driven by a single-minded motive of profit. Profit will keep shareholders happy. not necessarily the workers, not necessarily the employees, not necessarily the suppliers, not necessarily the community at large. The idea of G&H certification is to imbibe G&H values in companies so that they take a more holistic approach to happiness and well-being, to include all stakeholders, not just shareholders, in their operations. Now, obviously, when we design the indicators, design the surveys and the questions, you cannot replicate every G&H certification for business index. We cannot replicate them exactly. They have to be country-specific, sector-specific, perhaps even region-specific. So in Bhutan, we have started piloting the certification process. We've started piloting some of the certification process in India as well. So today, on this WATS forum, I take the opportunity of thanking RIS for the wonderful job that they're doing, thanking MQDC for their support and bringing us all together, and while acknowledging that Thailand and Bhutan, as different as we are, we share many things in common, I want to propose that another area where we can share in common is to do pioneering work in G&H certification for business. Thank you very much. Kariche.
Thank you very much, Dasho Tshering Tobgay. Thank you. He's showing us how targeting gross national happiness can help out put society on a path to sustainable well-being.